Good evening, my dear friends. I am delighted to stand before you tonight to share a profound truth that has transformed countless lives, including my own. The truth I speak of is not complicated or mysterious, though many have made it seem so. It is simply this. The world you experience is nothing more than yourself pushed out. Your consciousness is the only reality. Tonight we shall explore together the divine power that resides within you, the power of assumption. For in this very moment, as you listen to these words, you possess the ability to reshape your entire world merely by assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled. You see, my dear friends, most of humanity lives life backwards. They believe that they must first see evidence in the external world before they can believe in their desires. But I tell you this, mine as it is written in Scripture, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. This is not merely poetic language, it is the fundamental law of creation. Consider for a moment how you operate in your daily life. When you sit in a chair, do you first test it thoroughly to see if it will hold your weight? Do you anxiously worry that it might collapse beneath you? Of course not. You simply assume the chair will support you, and in that assumption you sit down without the slightest concern. This same principle applies to every aspect of your life. Whatever you assume to be true, whatever state you occupy in consciousness, must inevitably manifest in your physical experience. This is not wishful thinking or some modern theory of positive psychology. This is the ancient wisdom that has been veiled in metaphor and allegory throughout the sacred texts of all traditions. Let me share with you an experience that illustrates this principle perfectly. Many years ago, when I was living in New York, I received word that my brother Victor was seriously ill in Barbados. I had no money for passage, and in those war years, securing a ticket seemed impossible. The quota was small and the waiting list was long. But I understood the principle I'm sharing with you tonight. Instead of focusing on the obstacles, I assumed that I was already in Barbados. In my imagination, I slept in my childhood home. I felt the tropical breeze against my skin. I heard the familiar sounds of the island. I lived from the state of consciousness of being already there. A few days later, a most remarkable series of events unfolded. A man I barely knew offered to help me secure passage. Within days, I found myself aboard a ship bound for Barbados, standing on the very island I had visited in my imagination. My brother, I'm pleased to tell you, recovered completely. You see, the outside world is dead. It has no power to act except as it is animated by your consciousness. When you change your concept of self, when you assume a new state in your imagination, the world must conform to reflect this new assumption. This, my dear friends, is the first principle I wish to impress upon you tonight. You must begin by assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled. If you desire wealth, you must assume the feeling of wealth. If you desire health, you must assume the feeling of perfect health. If you desire love, you must assume the feeling of being loved. The how and when of its manifestation is not your concern. Your only task is to assume the state of consciousness that would be yours if your desire were already fulfilled. For imagination creates reality, and what you assume today will form the world you experience tomorrow. As we continue our journey together, I will show you how to harness this divine power within you, how to master the art of assumption, and how to transform your life completely through the creative use of your imagination. For truly all things are possible to him who believes. Let us now move deeper into this profound truth, exploring exactly how to assume the state of your wish fulfilled and how to persist in that assumption until it hardens into fact in your physical world. Now let us delve deeper into this principle that I call living from the end. As I've shared with you, the secret to manifesting your desires is not in trying to make them happen, but in assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Consider for a moment what it means to live from the end. The end, my friends, is not some distant point in the future that you must struggle to reach. The end is a state of consciousness, a feeling, an assumption that you can occupy right now in this very moment. When you live from the end, you are not concerned with the process of how your desire will manifest. You are not anxiously looking for signs or evidence in the outer world. Instead, you dwell mentally in the state of having already received what you desire. You feel the naturalness of it, the reality of it in your imagination. Let me illustrate this with a simple example. If you desired a promotion at work, most people would focus on what they need to do to earn that promotion. They would work harder, longer hours. They would worry and strive, always looking towards some future point when their desire might be fulfilled. But the man or woman who understands this principle would approach it differently. They would ask themselves, how would I feel if I already had this promotion? What would my day look like? How would I carry myself? What would my colleagues say to me? And then in their imagination they would experience the reality of already having received the promotion. They would feel the satisfaction, the confidence, the joy that accompanies the fulfilled wish. They would hear the congratulations of friends and colleagues. They would mentally occupy the office that comes with the new position. In their imagination they would live completely from the end, as though the desired state were already achieved. Now, many of you may be thinking, but Neville, isn't this just pretending? How can simply imagining something make it a reality? And to that I would say, imagination is not merely idle fantasy. Imagination is the very substance of reality. The world we experience is nothing more than the fulfillment of our imaginal acts. Remember the words of William Blake, what is now proved was once only imagined. Everything in your world, from the chair you're sitting on to the most advanced technologies, began as someone's imagination. Your physical reality is constantly being shaped by the activity of your imagination, whether you are conscious of it or not. This is why it is so crucial to be intentional about what you imagine and what states you occupy in consciousness. You are constantly living from some state, constantly assuming something to be true about yourself and your world. The question is, are you assuming states that you desire, or are you assuming states that you do not desire? Let me share with you a personal experience that further illustrates this principle. Many years ago I desired to travel to London, but during wartime such travel seemed impossible. Instead of focusing on the seeming barriers, I began to sleep as though I were in London. In my imagination I walked the streets of London. I saw the familiar sights. I felt the cool London air. I assumed the state of being in London so completely that it felt entirely natural to me. Within a matter of weeks, to the amazement of all who knew me, I received passage to England. You see, when you assume a state with such conviction that it feels natural to you, the whole universe conspires to bring about the fulfillment of that assumption. Now, let me address a common misunderstanding. Living from the end does not mean that you do nothing in the physical world. Action will still occur, but it will be inspired action rather than forced action. When you have truly assumed the state of the wish fulfilled, you will find yourself naturally taking the steps that lead to its manifestation. The difference is that these actions will not be driven by anxiety or neediness. They will not stem from the belief that you must make your desire happen. Instead, they will flow naturally from your new state of consciousness, guided by an inner wisdom that always knows the shortest route to the fulfillment of your desire. As we continue this journey together, I want you to begin experimenting with this principle in your own life. Choose a desire, something that you truly want to experience or possess. Then, before you sleep tonight, close your eyes and assume the feeling of already having it. Feel the reality of it. Experience the joy, the gratitude, the satisfaction that comes with its fulfillment. Fall asleep in this state, for sleep is the doorway to your subconscious mind. Remember, my dear friends, the feeling is the secret. Not merely the visualization, not merely the words you speak, but the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is the key that unlocks the door to manifestation. My dear friends, I wish to speak to you about something I call the law of assumption. This law, once understood, will revolutionize your approach to life and manifestation. It is the foundation upon which all successful creation must be built. The law of assumption simply states this: whatever you assume to be true, whatever you claim yourself to be in consciousness, will inevitably express itself in your outer world. In simpler terms, assumptions, when persisted in, harden into fact. This is not a new principle. It has been taught through the ages, though often veiled in symbolic language. In the Bible it is written, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." And again, "All things whatsoever ye pray and ask for, believe that ye have received them, and ye shall have them." These are not mere poetic expressions. They are precise descriptions of the law that governs human experience. You see, my friends, there is no separation between your inner world and your outer world. The conditions and circumstances of your life are nothing more than the outward picturing of your inner assumptions. Your world is yourself pushed out. Every person, every circumstance that you encounter is bearing witness to what you have been assuming about yourself and others. Let me emphasize this point. Your assumptions are not influenced by your outer world. Your outer world is influenced by your assumptions. This is the exact opposite of what most people believe. Most live their lives at the mercy of circumstances, allowing external conditions to determine their inner states. But the man or woman who understands the law of assumption lives from the inside out, not from the outside in. Consider the story of the woman who came to one of my lectures in New York. She had been seeking employment for months without success. Each interview ended with the same result: rejection. As she listened to me speak about the law of assumption, a light dawned in her consciousness. She realized that she had been assuming rejection even before she entered each interview. That night she decided to apply this principle. Before sleeping, she assumed the feeling of having already secured the perfect position. She imagined herself sitting at her new desk, feeling the satisfaction of doing work she loved and receiving a salary that exceeded her expectations. She felt the reality of it so completely that it seemed to her that she had already been working there for months. The next morning, she received a call from a company she had never applied to. They had heard of her qualifications through a mutual acquaintance and wanted to interview her that very day. By the end of the week, she was employed in a position that matched precisely what she had imagined, even down to the exact salary she had envisioned. This, my dear friends, is the law of assumption in action. The outer circumstances conformed perfectly to what she had assumed to be true in her consciousness. But I want you to notice something important about this story. Her opportunity did not come through the channels she expected. She did not receive a call from any of the companies where she had interviewed. Instead, a completely new channel opened up, one that she could not have foreseen or planned. My dear friends, I wish to speak to you about something I call the law of assumption. This law, once understood, will revolutionize your approach to life and manifestation. It is the foundation upon which all successful creation must be built. The law of assumption simply states this: whatever you assume to be true, whatever you claim yourself to be in consciousness, will inevitably express itself in your outer world. In simpler terms, assumptions, when persisted in, harden into fact. This is not a new principle. It has been taught through the ages, though often veiled in symbolic language. In the Bible it is written, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." And again, "All things whatsoever ye pray and ask for, believe that ye have received them, and ye shall have them." These are not mere poetic expressions. They are precise descriptions of the law that governs human experience. You see, my friends, there is no separation between your inner world and your outer world. The conditions and circumstances of your life are nothing more than the outward picturing of your inner assumptions. Your world is yourself pushed out. Every person, every circumstance that you encounter is bearing witness to what you have been assuming about yourself and others. Let me emphasize this point. Your assumptions are not influenced by your outer world. Your outer world is influenced by your assumptions. This is the exact opposite of what most people believe. Most live their lives at the mercy of circumstances, allowing external conditions to determine their inner states. But the man or woman who understands the law of assumption lives from the inside out, not from the outside in. Consider the story of the woman who came to one of my lectures in New York. She had been seeking employment for months without success. Each interview ended with the same result: rejection. As she listened to me speak about the law of assumption, a light dawned in her consciousness. She realized that she had been assuming rejection even before she entered each interview. That night she decided to apply this principle. Before sleeping, she assumed the feeling of having already secured the perfect position. She imagined herself sitting at her new desk, feeling the satisfaction of doing work she loved and receiving a salary that exceeded her expectations. She felt the reality of it so completely that it seemed to her that she had already been working there for months. The next morning, she received a call from a company she had never applied to. They had heard of her qualifications through a mutual acquaintance and wanted to interview her that very day. By the end of the week, she was employed in a position that matched precisely what she had imagined, even down to the exact salary she had envisioned. This, my dear friends, is the law of assumption in action. The outer circumstances conformed perfectly to what she had assumed to be true in her consciousness. But I want you to notice something important about this story. Her opportunity did not come through the channels she expected. She did not receive a call from any of the companies where she had interviewed. Instead, a completely new channel opened up, one that she could not have foreseen or planned. As we continue our exploration of these divine principles, we must now focus on a critical aspect of successful manifestation: the feeling. For while many understand the importance of mental imagery, fewer grasp the essential truth that the feeling is the secret, the very key that unlocks the door to manifestation. You must feel yourself into the state desired. It is not enough to merely visualize or intellectually affirm your wish fulfilled. You must capture and maintain the feeling that would be yours if your desire were already an accomplished fact. This feeling state is the prayers that are answered, for feeling is the language of the subconscious mind. Consider how you feel when you possess something you once desired. There is a natural sense of completion, of fulfillment, perhaps even of slight indifference, because the thing is now yours. It is no longer an object of desire, but simply a part of your reality. This is the feeling you must capture in your imagination. Many people make the mistake of praying with a feeling of desire, of want, of absence. But this only affirms the lack of the thing desired. Instead, you must pray with the feeling of possession, of gratitude for having already received that which you seek. This subtle but profound distinction makes all the difference in effective manifestation. Let me illustrate this with a simple analogy. If you were hungry and seated at a restaurant, you would not continue to feel hungry after placing your order. You would naturally relax, knowing that your meal was being prepared and would soon arrive. You might engage in conversation, enjoy the ambiance, perhaps sip a beverage. There would be an ease, a naturalness to your state, because you know without doubt that your hunger will soon be satisfied. This is precisely the attitude you must adopt in relation to your desires. Once you have placed your order with the universe through the act of assumption, you must release the hunger, the wanting, the sense of absence. You must assume the natural feeling that would be yours after the desire's fulfillment. I often use the example of a ladder to explain this principle. If you want to climb to the top of a ladder, you must look up and fix your attention on the goal. Yet if you look down out of fear of falling, you will inevitably lose your footing. Similarly, when manifesting your desires, you must keep your attention fixed on the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If you look down by focusing on the absence of your desire, you will fall back into the old state of consciousness. The Bible illustrates this perfectly in the story of the prodigal son. Notice that when the son returned home, the father did not question him about his past mistakes or the ways he had squandered his inheritance. Instead, he immediately embraced him, called for the finest robe, placed a ring on his finger, and prepared a celebratory feast. This is how you must treat yourself when you return to the awareness of your true nature as a divine creator. You must immediately claim your rightful inheritance without dwelling on past failures or present limitations. I am reminded of a woman who attended my lectures several years ago. She had been separated from her husband for nearly 2 years, and despite her best efforts, reconciliation seemed impossible. After hearing about the power of feeling the wish fulfilled, she decided to apply this principle to her marriage. Instead of focusing on the hurt, the anger, and the apparent impossibility of reconciliation, she began to sleep as though her husband were right beside her. She felt his presence in the bed. She imagined the warmth of his body next to hers. She heard the sound of his breathing. Most importantly, she captured the feeling of security, love, and companionship that would be hers if they were reunited. Within 2 weeks, her husband contacted her for the first time in months. Within a month, they were discussing the possibility of reconciliation. And within 3 months, they had not only reconciled, but had developed a deeper, more loving relationship than they had ever known before. You see, my friends, it was not the visualization alone that transformed her reality. It was her ability to capture and maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled. She succeeded because she understood that the feeling is the secret. Now, my dear friends, having understood that feeling is the secret, we must address another vital component of successful manifestation: persistence in the assumption. For it is not enough to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled momentarily. You must persist in this assumption until it hardens into fact in your physical world. Many fail to manifest their desires not because they lack imagination or the ability to feel the wish fulfilled, but because they lack persistence. They assume the state once or twice, perhaps for a few moments before sleep, but then return to their habitual way of thinking and feeling throughout the day. This inconsistency dilutes the power of their assumption and delays, if not prevents, its manifestation. Remember that your subconscious mind is impressed not by the intensity of your assumption, but by its consistency. A state that you consistently occupy, even with moderate intensity, will impress your subconscious more powerfully than a state you occupy intensely but briefly. This is why Scripture advises us to pray without ceasing. This doesn't mean to be constantly engaged in formal prayer, but rather to maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled throughout your daily activities. Your mental and emotional state is your prayer, and it is offered continually, whether you are aware of it or not. I often tell the story of a young actor who came to me, frustrated by his inability to secure roles in his chosen profession. He had talent, training, and dedication, yet opportunities seemed to elude him. After hearing me speak about the law of assumption, he decided to apply this principle to his career. Each night he would fall asleep imagining himself on a movie set. He felt the lights on his face, heard the director's instructions, experienced the satisfaction of delivering his lines perfectly. Most importantly, he captured the feeling of being a successful, sought-after actor. But his persistence went beyond these nightly sessions. Throughout the day, whenever his mind was not actively engaged, he would return to this assumption. While riding the bus, waiting in line, or during any idle moment, he would recapture the feeling of being the successful actor he desired to be. Within 3 weeks, he received a call from a casting director who had seen him in a small production months earlier. This led to a minor role in a film, which then opened the door to increasingly significant opportunities. Within a year, he had achieved the level of success he had been assuming in his imagination. The key to his success was not just the clarity of his mental imagery or the authenticity of his feeling state, but his persistence in maintaining that state despite the contradictory evidence of his senses. He refused to be deterred by temporary setbacks or moments of doubt. When such thoughts arose, he immediately returned to his assumption, reaffirming the reality of his wish fulfilled. This persistence is what distinguishes the successful manifester from the occasional daydreamer. The world is filled with people who occasionally imagine better circumstances for themselves, who momentarily feel what it would be like to achieve their goals, but few have the discipline to persist in these assumptions regardless of appearances. The Bible illustrates this principle beautifully in the story of Joshua and the walls of Jericho. For 6 days the Israelites marched around the city walls with no apparent effect. It would have been easy to abandon the effort, to conclude that their actions were futile. But they persisted, and on the 7th day the walls came tumbling down. Similarly, you must persist in your assumption even when the walls of current reality seem impenetrable. You must continue to march around those walls, maintaining the feeling of your wish fulfilled, until they too come tumbling down, revealing the promised land of your desire made manifest. As we deepen our understanding of these principles, we must now consider the concept of states. For everything you experience in life comes to you while you are occupying a particular state of consciousness. Your world is determined not by what exists outside of you, but by the state you occupy within. A state can be defined as an attitude of mind, a mood, a feeling about yourself and the world around you. When you assume a certain state, the world must respond accordingly, presenting you with the people, circumstances, and events that correspond to that state. Consider how differently you experience the world when you are in a state of confidence versus a state of insecurity, or a state of love versus a state of fear. The external reality doesn't change, but your perception and experience of it change dramatically depending on the state you occupy. This is why the great mystics and spiritual teachers throughout history have emphasized the importance of dying to the old man and being born again. They were speaking of the transition from one state to another. The old man represents the state you currently occupy that does not serve your desires, while the new birth represents your entrance into the state that aligns with your wish fulfilled. In Scripture we read, "Put off the old man with his deeds and put on the new man." This is not talking about physical death and rebirth, but about the psychological death of an old concept of self and the birth of a new self-concept. It is about moving from one state to another. Every state exists as a potential that you can occupy at any moment. The state of wealth, the state of health, the state of being loved. These are not distant possibilities that you must create. They are existing states into which you can move your consciousness right now. Think of these states as mansions in your Father's house. Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions." These mansions are states of consciousness, each one complete with its own circumstances, its own relationships, its own experiences. Your task is not to build these mansions, but to enter and occupy them through the power of assumption. I recall a conversation with a gentleman who had struggled with financial lack for most of his life. He had tried various business ventures, investment strategies, and income-generating schemes, all with limited success. After hearing me speak about states of consciousness, he realized that all his efforts had been made while occupying a state of lack. He was trying to get out of lack while still firmly entrenched in that state. Instead of continuing this futile approach, he decided to simply move into the state of wealth. He asked himself, how would I think, feel, and act if I were already wealthy? He began to assume the natural confidence, the ease around money, the generous attitude that characterizes the wealthy individual. He found that when he truly occupied this state, ideas and opportunities came to him effortlessly. People responded to him differently. Doors opened that had previously been closed. Within 6 months, his financial situation had transformed completely, not through strenuous effort or clever strategies, but through a simple change of state. The same principle applies to every desire you hold. If you wish for a loving relationship, you must occupy the state of being loved. If you wish for perfect health, you must occupy the state of being healthy. If you wish for professional success, you must occupy the state of being successful. The outer world has no choice but to reflect the state you consistently occupy. This understanding liberates you from the endless struggle to change external conditions. You need not fight against circumstances or try to manipulate the world around you. You need only choose the state you wish to occupy, step into it through the power of assumption, and persist in it until the outer world reshapes itself to match your inner reality. Now, my dear friends, I wish to share with you a concept that is often misunderstood but is absolutely essential to successful manifestation. In the Bible, we read that God created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. This 7th day, the Sabbath, was not a day of inactivity because God was tired. No, it was a day of rest because the work was completed. This principle applies directly to the law of assumption. After you have assumed the feeling of your wish fulfilled, after you have mentally moved into the state of having your desire, you must enter the Sabbath rest. This means resting in the certainty that your assumption is now being made manifest. It means ceasing all effort, all anxiety, all concern about the realization of your desire. Most people resist this Sabbath state. Having assumed their desire in imagination, they immediately return to the world of the senses and begin looking for evidence of its fulfillment. When they don't see immediate results, they become anxious, doubtful, and begin to work harder to make their desire happen. But this very effort, this refusal to rest, implies that the work is not yet complete, that something more needs to be done. The true Sabbath is a mental attitude of rest. It is the absolute conviction that what you have assumed in imagination is now a reality in the spiritual realm and must inevitably manifest in the physical world. In this Sabbath state, you no longer pray for your desire to be fulfilled. You give thanks for its fulfillment. You no longer seek signs or evidences, you live as though your prayer has already been answered. Consider the story of Jesus at the tomb of Lazarus. Before performing the miracle of raising Lazarus from the dead, he said, "Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me." Notice the past tense, hast heard, not will hear. He gave thanks for the answer before there was any physical evidence of it. This is the Sabbath state, the certainty that it is done. I'm reminded of a woman who attended my lectures in New York. She had been trying for years to reconcile with her estranged daughter. She had written letters, made phone calls, even traveled to see her daughter, all to no avail. After learning about the law of assumption, she took a different approach. She began to assume that the reconciliation had already taken place. In her imagination, she felt the joy of her daughter's embrace, heard her loving words, experienced the warmth of their restored relationship. Most importantly, she then entered the Sabbath rest. She ceased all anxious effort, all desperate attempts to make contact. She lived in the quiet certainty that the reconciliation was already accomplished in spirit. 3 weeks later, her daughter called her, the first contact in over 2 years. Within a month, they had not only reconciled but had developed a closer relationship than ever before. The miracle occurred not because of the woman's strenuous efforts, but because she finally ceased those efforts and entered the Sabbath state. As we deepen our understanding of these divine principles, let me introduce you to what I call the law of reversibility. This law states that just as feeling follows action, action can also follow feeling. Let me explain this profound concept more clearly. Normally, your feelings are the result of your actions and experiences. If you achieve success in your business, you feel the emotion of accomplishment. If someone treats you with kindness, you feel appreciated. If you win a competition, you feel triumphant. In these examples, the action precedes the feeling. But the law of reversibility tells us that this process can be reversed. You can induce the feeling first, and the action or experience will follow. By assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are employing this law of reversibility to bring about the conditions that would normally produce such a feeling. This is why I constantly emphasize the importance of feeling. When you capture the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are not merely engaging in a psychological exercise. You are activating a spiritual law that must produce in your outer world the circumstances that match your inner feeling state. Let me illustrate this with a simple example. If you smile, you begin to feel happier. If you stand tall with your shoulders back, you begin to feel more confident. The physical action produces the feeling, but the reverse is also true. If you feel happiness, you will naturally smile. If you feel confidence, you will naturally stand taller. The feeling produces the action. In the realm of manifestation, we use this law deliberately. If financial abundance would make you feel secure and free, then by assuming the feeling of security and freedom now, you set in motion the causes that must result in financial abundance. If a loving relationship would make you feel cherished and appreciated, then by assuming the feeling of being cherished and appreciated now, you attract the relationship that will give you those very feelings. I recall a gentleman who approached me after a lecture, confessing that he had spent years trying to achieve a particular professional position without success. After hearing about the law of reversibility, he realized his mistake. He had been trying to get the position in order to feel respected and accomplished. But the law of assumption works in the opposite direction. Following our discussion, he began to assume the feeling of being respected and accomplished regardless of his current position. He carried himself with the dignity and confidence of someone who had already achieved his professional goals. He spoke with the authority and certainty that comes with accomplishment. Within 2 months, he was offered a position even higher than the one he had been pursuing. The outer experience conformed perfectly to the inner feeling state he had been assuming. This is the law of reversibility in action. Now I wish to share with you one of the most practical and powerful techniques in the art of manifestation, what I call the pruning shears of revision. Just as a gardener uses pruning shears to shape a plant, removing unwanted growth and encouraging desirable development, you can use the faculty of revision to reshape your past and consequently your future. Many people believe that the past is fixed and immutable, that what has happened cannot be changed. But from the perspective of consciousness, this is not entirely true. While the physical events may have occurred in a certain way, your memory and interpretation of those events can be revised, and in revising them, you change their impact on your present and future. The technique of revision is simple yet profound. Each night before you fall asleep, review the events of the day. If any experience was less than perfect, if there was any unpleasantness, any failure, any misunderstanding, revise it in your imagination. See it unfold not as it did, but as you would have wished it to unfold. If you had an argument with a colleague, revise it to a friendly, productive conversation. If you missed an opportunity, revise it so that you recognized and seized the opportunity. If you received disappointing news, revise it to the good news you would have preferred to hear. As you fall asleep with these revised images in your mind, you are literally rewriting the impact of these events on your subconscious. Your subconscious does not distinguish between an imagined event and a physical one. it accepts the revised version as fact and responds accordingly. Over time, this practice of revision has remarkable effects. Not only does it dissolve negative from your past, but it also reshapes your future. As you revise experiences of failure into experiences of success, your subconscious begins to guide you toward actual success in your waking life. As you revise conflict into harmony, your relationships naturally become more harmonious. I'm reminded of a lady who attended my lectures in San Francisco. She had endured a difficult relationship with her mother-in-law for nearly a decade. Every interaction was strained, every family gathering marred by tension and unspoken resentment. After learning about the technique of revision, she decided to apply it to this challenging relationship. Each night she would revise their recent interactions. In her imagination, she replaced tense conversations with warm, friendly ones. She revised subtle criticisms into words of appreciation. She reimagined stiff, formal embraces as genuine, loving hugs. Within 3 weeks, she noticed a remarkable shift in her mother-in-law's behavior. The criticism ceased, the tension dissolved. Conversations became easier, warmer, more authentic. What's most fascinating is that her mother-in-law never consciously decided to change her behavior. The change occurred naturally, effortlessly, as a response to the revised assumptions held in the daughter-in-law's consciousness. This is the power of revision. By changing your memory and interpretation of past events, you change the patterns that shape your future experiences. The past, present, and future are not separate, disconnected segments of time. They are interconnected aspects of consciousness. Change one and you inevitably change the others. Having explored the crucial practices of assumption, feeling, persistence, and revision, we must now address another vital aspect of successful manifestation, the art of detachment. This concept is often misunderstood, yet it is essential to the fulfillment of your desires. Detachment does not mean indifference toward your desire or a lack of interest in its manifestation. Rather, it means releasing the anxiety, the doubt, and the desperate need to control how and when your desire will manifest. It is a state of peaceful certainty that what you have assumed in consciousness must inevitably express itself in your physical reality. Many seekers fail to manifest their desires because they remain attached to the process, constantly looking for signs, continually checking for evidence, obsessively worrying about the how and when of manifestation. This attachment, this anxious concern, is itself a confession that you do not yet have what you desire. It is a state of consciousness that affirms lack rather than fulfillment. True detachment comes from the deep knowing that what you have assumed in imagination is already yours in the spiritual realm. Just as a farmer plants a seed and then allows nature to do its work, you must plant the seed of your desire in consciousness and then allow the laws of mind to bring it to fruition in the physical world. Consider how you feel about things you already possess. You do not wake up each morning anxiously wondering if your home will still be there or if the clothes in your closet will have disappeared overnight. You have a natural, quiet confidence about the things that are already yours. This is the feeling of detachment you must cultivate toward the fulfillment of your desires. I am reminded of a businessman who attended my lectures many years ago. He had been working diligently to secure a particular contract that would transform his company. He had meetings, made proposals, followed up repeatedly, all with an increasing sense of desperation as time passed without a decision. After hearing me speak about detachment, he took a radical approach. He assumed that the contract was already his, felt the satisfaction and security that would accompany this achievement, and then completely released all concern about it. He stopped checking for updates, ceased his anxious follow-ups, and focused instead on running his business as though the contract were already secured. 2 weeks later, he received a call informing him that not only had he been awarded the contract, but the terms were even more favorable than he had originally proposed. The client specifically mentioned that it was his apparent confidence and lack of desperation that had set him apart from other bidders. Now let us explore a dimension of consciousness that shapes your reality in profound yet often unrecognized ways, your inner conversations. These are the dialogues you hold within yourself throughout the day, the things you mentally hear yourself saying and others saying to you. Your inner conversations are among the most powerful determinants of your experience. They reveal your true assumptions about yourself and the world, and they shape the events and relationships of your life with unerring precision. As it is written in the book of Job, "For the thing I greatly feared has come upon me, and what I dreaded has happened to me." Your fears expressed in your inner conversations become the blueprint for your future experiences. But just as negative inner conversations can create undesirable circumstances, positive inner conversations can create experiences that align with your desires. By consciously choosing the conversations you hold in your mind, you can reshape your world from within. Imagine for a moment that you desire a promotion at work. Instead of mentally rehearsing all the reasons why you might be overlooked or all the obstacles that stand in your way, construct an inner conversation that supports your desire. Hear your colleagues congratulating you on your new position. Listen to your supervisor expressing confidence in your abilities. Feel the satisfaction of mentally responding to these congratulations with gratitude and confidence. This exercise is not mere positive thinking or wishful daydreaming. It is the deliberate use of a spiritual law. By creating and maintaining inner conversations that align with your wish fulfilled, you are literally programming your subconscious mind to manifest those very circumstances. I recall a teacher who had been passed over for the position of department chair multiple times. She came to me frustrated and discouraged, convinced that she would never receive the recognition she deserved. After learning about the power of inner conversations, she decided to transform the mental dialogue she had been holding about her professional life. Instead of mentally rehearsing complaints about being overlooked, she began to hear congratulatory remarks from her colleagues. Rather than silently arguing with her principal about past decisions, she constructed imaginary conversations in which the principal expressed appreciation for her contributions and confidence in her leadership abilities. Within one semester, the current department chair unexpectedly resigned, and she was immediately appointed to the position. The very colleagues and administrators she had heard congratulating her in imagination now spoke nearly identical words in physical reality. As we continue our exploration of these transformative principles, I want to speak to you about what I call the divine pattern, the blueprint for all successful manifestation. This pattern is revealed in the very structure of creation itself and is outlined in Scripture for those who have eyes to see. In the first chapter of Genesis, we read that God created the heavens and the earth through a specific process. First, God saw that which he desired to create, and God saw that it was good. Then God spoke his word, and God said, "Let there be." Finally, God rested, knowing that his word must be made flesh, and the evening and the morning were the first day. This is the divine pattern that you must follow in your own acts of creation. First, you must see clearly in your imagination that which you desire to create in your reality. Clarity of vision is essential. Vague wishes produce vague results. Next, you must speak your word, not necessarily audibly, but within your consciousness. This is the assumption of the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It is your inner assertion that what you desire is already yours. Finally, you must rest in the certainty that what you have decreed in consciousness must manifest in experience. This is the Sabbath state we discussed earlier, the quiet confidence that your creative work is complete and needs only time to unfold in the physical world. Let me illustrate this pattern with the story of a young woman who wanted to travel to Europe but lacked the financial means to do so. Having learned the divine pattern, she began by creating a clear mental image of herself in specific European locations. She saw herself standing before the Eiffel Tower, walking along the canals of Venice, exploring the ruins of ancient Rome. She then spoke her word by assuming the feeling of already being on this European tour. She felt the excitement, the wonder, the cultural enrichment that such travel would bring. She mentally heard herself describing her experiences to friends upon her return. Finally, she entered the Sabbath rest. She released all anxiety about how this trip would be financed or when it would occur. She lived in the quiet certainty that what she had established in consciousness was now moving toward physical expression. Within 2 months, she was offered an unexpected opportunity to serve as a companion and assistant to an elderly woman who was planning an extended European tour. Not only were all her expenses covered, but she also received a generous stipend for her services. The very cities and landmarks she had visited in her imagination became her physical reality, unfolding in a way she could never have anticipated. This is the divine pattern at work. See it, speak it, and rest in the certainty of its fulfillment. It is a pattern that never fails when properly applied, for it is the very method by which all creation comes into being. My dear friends, as we deepen our understanding of these divine principles, let us explore a concept that underlies all successful manifestation, the law of identical harvest. This law, which is expressed in Scripture as "whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap," reveals a profound truth about the relationship between your consciousness and your experience. The seed you plant in the garden of your mind will produce after its own kind. If you plant a seed of lack, you cannot harvest abundance. If you plant a seed of illness, you cannot reap health. If you plant a seed of conflict, you cannot gather peace. The harvest must be identical in kind to the seed. This is why it is so crucial to be mindful of what you are sowing in consciousness. Your thoughts, feelings, assumptions, and inner conversations are the seeds you are continuously planting. And as surely as an acorn grows into an oak and not a pine, these seeds will produce experiences that match their nature. Consider the case of a gentleman who came to me complaining of his persistent financial struggles. Despite working diligently and attempting various business ventures, he remained in a state of constant lack. As we spoke, it became apparent that his mental conversation was filled with anxiety about money. He constantly affirmed to himself that finances were difficult, that wealth was elusive, that he never had quite enough. I explained to him that these very assumptions were the seeds he was planting, and they could only produce a harvest of continued financial struggle. To change his experience, he needed to change the seed. Instead of sowing thoughts of lack, he needed to sow thoughts of abundance. Instead of affirming difficulty, he needed to affirm ease and sufficiency. Following our conversation, he began a disciplined practice of assuming financial abundance. He imagined his bank accounts growing, his investments prospering, his business thriving. Most importantly, he felt the relief, the security, the freedom that financial abundance would bring. These feelings were the fertilizer that nourished the new seeds he was planting. Within 6 months, his financial situation had completely transformed. A business that had been struggling suddenly began to flourish. Investment opportunities appeared that multiplied his savings. The financial ease he had been assuming in consciousness manifested in his experience. Now I wish to share with you a concept that may initially seem abstract, but has profound practical implications for your manifestation practice: the dimensionality of consciousness. Your consciousness operates on multiple levels or dimensions, and understanding these dimensions can dramatically enhance your ability to manifest your desires. The first dimension of consciousness is your objective awareness of the physical world, what you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell with your physical senses. This is the most superficial level of consciousness, and unfortunately the level at which most people remain fixated. The second dimension is your subjective awareness, your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about what you perceive. This dimension colors and interprets the raw data of your senses. Two people can observe the same external event yet have entirely different experiences of it because they process it through different subjective filters. The third dimension is your imaginative awareness, your ability to see what is not yet visible to the physical eye, to experience in mind what has not yet manifested in matter. This is the creative dimension where all manifestation begins. The fourth dimension, and the most profound, is what I call pure awareness or pure consciousness, the I am that precedes all attributes and conditions. This is your true identity, the divine aspect of your being that transcends all limitations and contains all possibilities. Effective manifestation requires that you shift your center of consciousness from the first and second dimensions to the third and fourth. Instead of being dominated by what your senses report or what your conditioned mind believes, you must learn to operate from the creative and transcendent dimensions of your being. I recall a conversation with a woman who had been diagnosed with a chronic health condition. Medical professionals had told her that she would need medication for the rest of her life and that certain activities would always be restricted for her. She had accepted this assessment and had organized her life around these limitations. After hearing me speak about the dimensionality of consciousness, she realized that she had been living exclusively in the first and second dimensions, accepting the physical evidence of her condition and the subjective beliefs she had formed about it. She decided to shift to the third and fourth dimensions, using her imaginative faculty to see herself as perfectly healthy and identifying with the pure I am that transcends all conditions. Each night before sleep, she would imagine herself engaging in activities that her condition supposedly prohibited. She felt the freedom, the vitality, the joy of perfect health. She identified not with her body or its apparent limitations, but with the limitless consciousness that is her true identity. Within 3 months, her symptoms had diminished significantly. Within 6 months, her doctor was baffled by the improvement in her condition and reduced her medication. Within a year, she was completely free of both symptoms and medication, engaging in all the activities she had been told would be impossible for her. Her healing did not come from battling her condition on the physical level or from trying to change her subjective beliefs through positive thinking. It came from shifting to the creative and transcendent dimensions of her consciousness, where all things are possible and where perfect health already existed as a state she could occupy. Let us now explore one of the most effective methods for impressing your desires upon your subconscious mind, what I call the sleep technique. This practice harnesses the natural functions of your mind during sleep to accelerate the manifestation of your desires. When you go to sleep, your conscious analytical mind relaxes its grip, and your subconscious becomes more receptive to suggestion. The thoughts, images, and feelings you hold as you drift off to sleep sink deeply into your subconscious and become powerful determinants of your future experience. This is why Scripture advises, "Let not the sun go down upon your wrath." The state of consciousness you maintain as you fall asleep continues to work within you throughout the night, either reinforcing old patterns or establishing new ones. Here is the technique as you lie in bed preparing for sleep. Create a scene in your imagination that implies the fulfillment of your desire. This scene should be simple, short, and easy to visualize. It should be a scene that would naturally occur after your desire has been realized, not during the process of its realization. For example, if you desire financial abundance, imagine a friend congratulating you on your prosperity. Feel the handshake or embrace. Hear the specific words being spoken. Notice the genuine joy in their expression. Feel your own natural response, the gratitude, the satisfaction, the sense of security that comes with financial abundance. If you desire a loving relationship, Imagine a scene where you and your partner are doing something simple and ordinary together, perhaps preparing dinner or taking a walk, but with an atmosphere of deep love and connection between you. Feel the emotions, hear the words, sense the natural ease and harmony of the relationship. The key to this technique is to fall asleep while maintaining the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If your mind wanders, gently bring it back to your imagined scene. Continue this until sleep overtakes you. Do not force sleep or become anxious about remaining awake. Simply persist in your imaginal scene, knowing that sleep will come naturally and that your subconscious will continue to work with the impression you have given it. I recall a young man who desperately wanted to own a home but had neither the down payment nor the credit history to qualify for a mortgage. After learning the sleep technique, he created a simple scene of himself receiving mail addressed to him at his new home. He felt the texture of the envelopes in his hands. He saw his name and the address of his desired home clearly printed on the mail. He experienced the satisfaction and pride of home ownership. Each night he would fall asleep maintaining the scene and the feelings associated with it. Within 2 months, an unexpected opportunity arose. A family member who was relocating offered to sell him their home with owner financing, requiring no down payment and no credit check. The address of this home was remarkably similar to the one he had been imagining on his mail. The sleep technique had bypassed his conscious doubts and fears, allowing his desire to impress itself directly upon his subconscious mind. Once impressed, his subconscious worked to bring about the circumstances that matched his inner assumption. My dear friends, we now come to what I consider the most fundamental and powerful concept in the art of manifestation, the principle of I am. These two simple words contain within them the secret of all creation, all manifestation, all transformation. I am is not merely a grammatical construction or a way of referring to yourself. It is the very name of God as revealed to Moses from the burning bush, I am that I am. This divine name reveals the ultimate truth about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to reality. Every time you declare I am, whether silently or aloud, you are invoking this creative power. Whatever follows those two words becomes impressed upon your subconscious mind as a statement of your identity, and your subconscious will work tirelessly to make your experience conform to that identity. If you continually declare I am sick, I am poor, I am unlucky, you are literally programming your subconscious to manifest these conditions in your experience. Conversely, if you consciously choose to declare I am healthy, I am wealthy, I am blessed, you set in motion the creative forces that will bring these states into manifestation. The power of I am goes beyond mere positive affirmations. When you declare I am, you are not merely describing your current state. You are defining your essence, your being. And since your being is the source of your doing and having, what you claim yourself to be determines what you will do and what you will possess. This is why Scripture declares, let the weak say I am strong. It is not suggesting that the weak person lie about their current condition. Rather, it is revealing the method by which weakness is transformed into strength, by assuming the identity of strength here and now, regardless of present appearances. I recall a conversation with a talented writer who had been struggling for years to complete his novel. Despite his natural gifts and his passion for writing, he found himself continually blocked, unable to maintain the momentum needed to finish his work. As we spoke, I noticed that he repeatedly made statements like I am blocked, I am struggling with this chapter, I am not disciplined enough. I explained to him the power of I am and suggested that he consciously change his declarations. Instead of affirming his blockage and struggle, he began to affirm I am a successful writer, I am creative and productive, I am disciplined and focused. He made these declarations not as wishful thinking or as descriptions of a future state, but as statements of his current identity. He claimed these qualities as aspects of his being, as expressions of his true self. Within weeks his writing began to flow with remarkable ease. The blocks that had hindered him dissolved, and his productivity increased dramatically. Within 6 months he had completed his novel and had begun receiving interest from publishers. His experience had conformed perfectly to the identity he had claimed through the power of I am. As we continue our exploration of these divine principles, I wish to share with you a concept that is beautifully expressed in the parable of the pearl of great price. In this parable, a merchant finds a pearl of such extraordinary value that he sells everything he owns to purchase it. This pearl represents your ideal state, the consciousness of already being or having that which you desire. The parable teaches that this state is so precious that it is worth sacrificing everything that does not align with it. Just as the merchant sold all his possessions to acquire the pearl, you must be willing to relinquish all thoughts, feelings, and assumptions that contradict your desired state. Many seekers fail in their manifestation efforts because they try to hold on to their old states of consciousness while reaching for new experiences. They want wealth but cling to beliefs about the difficulty of earning money. They want health but maintain the identity of someone with a chronic condition. They want loving relationships but preserve feelings of unworthiness or distrust. The pearl of great price cannot be possessed while you still clutch your old possessions. You must be willing to sell all to release completely your former states of consciousness in order to claim your new state. This is not as difficult as it might initially appear. It requires not arduous effort but simply a shift in allegiance. Just as it is impossible to serve two masters, it is impossible to occupy two states of consciousness simultaneously. When you give your full allegiance to your desired state, the old state must necessarily fall away. I am reminded of a woman who had been struggling with her weight for decades. She had tried countless diets and exercise programs, always with the same pattern: initial success followed by inevitable relapse. After hearing me speak about the pearl of great price, she realized her mistake. While attempting to create a new experience of health and fitness, she had maintained her identity as someone who struggles with weight. She decided to purchase the pearl by completely relinquishing this old identity. She stopped seeing herself as engaged in yet another attempt to lose weight, and instead assumed the consciousness of someone who was naturally healthy, fit, and at their ideal weight. She abandoned all thoughts of struggle, all memories of past failures, all concerns about future challenges. She gave her complete allegiance to her new state. The results were remarkable. Not only did she begin to lose weight steadily and easily, but her entire relationship with food and exercise transformed. What had once been a constant battle became a natural, joyful expression of her new identity. Within a year she had reached her ideal weight, and more importantly maintained it without the struggle that had characterized her previous attempts. This is the power of purchasing the pearl of great price, of giving your complete allegiance to your desired state, and relinquishing all that contradicts it. When you do this, your manifestation is not merely a change in circumstances, but a transformation of being, a rebirth into a new state of consciousness that naturally expresses as new experiences. Now I wish to share with you a principle that may contradict much of what you have been taught about achievement and success, what I call the law of least action. This law states that when you are truly aligned with your desiring consciousness, its manifestation requires the least effort, the simplest path, the most natural expression. The world teaches that significant achievement requires strenuous effort, persistent struggle, and overwhelming force of will. But I tell you that such effort is necessary only when you are attempting to achieve something while maintaining a consciousness that contradicts it. When your consciousness is perfectly aligned with your desire, when you have fully assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled, manifestation follows with an ease and naturalness that may astonish you. Consider how effortlessly you breathe, how naturally your heart beats, how easily you digest your food. These complex physiological processes occur without your conscious effort because they are in perfect alignment with the nature of your being. They are not struggles against what is, but natural expressions of what is. Similarly, when your consciousness is in perfect alignment with your desire, its manifestation becomes as natural and effortless as breathing. There may still be action involved, but it is inspired action rather than forced action. It flows from your being rather than being imposed upon it. I recall a musician who had been striving for years to achieve recognition in his field. He practiced obsessively, networked aggressively, and pursued opportunities with a desperate intensity that left him exhausted and frustrated. Despite his tremendous effort, success remained elusive. After hearing me speak about the law of least action, he took a radically different approach. Instead of continuing his frantic pursuit of success, he began to assume the consciousness of already being a respected, accomplished musician. He felt the satisfaction, the confidence, the natural ease that would accompany such achievement. Most importantly, he released the desperate need to make it happen through his own strenuous efforts. A remarkable shift occurred. His music began to flow more naturally, more authentically. His performances became expressions of joy rather than demonstrations of technical skill, and opportunities began to come to him with astonishing ease. A chance meeting led to an invitation to perform at a prestigious venue. A listener at that performance happened to be a music producer who offered him a recording contract. His career blossomed with a naturalness and ease that his years of desperate effort had never produced. My dear friends, we have explored how the law of assumption applies to various aspects of life, wealth, health, career success. But now let us turn our attention to a realm that touches the very heart of human experience, our relationships with others. Many seekers understand that they can transform their financial circumstances or physical conditions through the power of assumption. Yet they struggle to apply these same principles to their relationships. They believe that since other people have free will, these individuals cannot be changed through the faculty of imagination. But I tell you this profound truth. The people in your life are not separate from you. They are aspects of your consciousness made visible. Their behavior toward you, their opinions of you, their entire relationship with you is determined not by some independent choice on their part, but by what you assume about them and about yourself in relation to them. This is a challenging concept for many to accept, for it places complete responsibility in your hands. It is far easier to blame others for relationship difficulties, to see yourself as a victim of their moods, their temperaments, their choices. But when you truly understand the law of assumption, you realize that others have no choice but to conform to your assumptions about them. Consider the case of a woman who attended my lectures in Los Angeles. She had been in a marriage that had grown increasingly cold and distant over the years. Conversations had become perfunctory, affection rare, and genuine connection seemingly impossible. She had tried everything to improve the relationship, communication techniques, counseling, romantic gestures, all to no avail. After hearing me speak about the law of assumption in relationships, she decided to take a different approach. Instead of trying to change her husband's behavior directly, she changed her assumptions about him and about their marriage. Each night before sleep, she would imagine a simple scene, the two of them sitting together, engaged in warm, intimate conversation, feeling deeply connected and in love. She persisted in this practice despite the contradictory evidence of her senses each day. For the first week, nothing seemed to change. By the second week, she noticed her husband looking at her differently, with a softness in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. By the end of the month, the exact scene she had been imagining in her mind had become a regular occurrence in their physical experience. Their marriage transformed not through external effort or manipulation, but through a simple change in her assumptions. You see, my friends, when you change your concept of another person, they must change in your experience. They have no choice in the matter. Just as your arm must move when you command it, just as your foot must step where you direct it, the people in your world must play the parts that your assumptions assign to them. This is not to say that you control others as puppets or violate their free will. Rather, you are experiencing different aspects of consciousness as you shift your own awareness. The version of the person who appears in your life is the one that corresponds to your assumptions about them. As we deepen our understanding of the law of assumption, we must address what I call the invisible barrier, that seemingly impenetrable wall that stands between your desire and its manifestation. This barrier is not external to you. It does not exist in the world of circumstances or conditions. It exists solely in consciousness. Many seekers experience this phenomenon. They understand the principles we have discussed. They practice the techniques diligently. They assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Yet their desires remain unmanifest, as though an invisible force prevents their realization. What is this barrier? It is not a lack of effort or dedication. It is not a flaw in the law itself. The invisible barrier consists of beliefs that lie beneath your conscious awareness, deeply embedded assumptions about yourself and the world that contradict your conscious intentions. These subconscious beliefs were formed through years of experience, education, and cultural conditioning. They reside in the depths of your mind like underwater rocks, unseen from the surface yet powerful enough to sink the ship of your conscious desires. For instance, you may consciously assume wealth while subconsciously believing that money is the root of all evil. You may consciously assume health while subconsciously believing that sickness is inevitable with age. You may consciously assume loving relationships while subconsciously believing that you are unworthy of love. How then do you penetrate this invisible barrier? Not through force, not through more strenuous effort, but through persistence in your new assumption. When you consistently occupy your desired state in consciousness, when you faithfully maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled despite all contradictory evidence, you gradually dissolve the subconscious beliefs that form the barrier. I recall a young artist who had been struggling for years to achieve recognition for his work. He practiced all the principles of manifestation, imagining successful exhibitions, feeling the joy of artistic recognition, assuming the identity of a respected artist. Yet success remained elusive. In a moment of deep self-reflection, he discovered the invisible barrier, a childhood belief that true artists must struggle, that commercial success somehow diminished artistic integrity. This belief, formed when he was merely 10 years old, had been operating beneath his awareness, sabotaging his conscious intentions. Having identified this subconscious belief, he did not fight against it or try to forcibly remove it. Instead, he simply persisted more faithfully in his new assumption, knowing that the consistent occupation of his desired state would gradually dissolve the contradictory belief. He imagined scenes that implied both artistic integrity and commercial success. He felt the satisfaction of creating meaningful work that was also widely appreciated. Within 6 months, the invisible barrier had dissolved. He received an invitation to exhibit at a prestigious gallery, which led to both critical acclaim and substantial sales. The very success he had been unconsciously resisting became his natural experience once he had penetrated the invisible barrier through faithful persistence in his assumption. Now, my dear friends, I wish to address a question that often troubles those on the spiritual path. What is the true nature and purpose of desire? Many spiritual traditions teach that desire is the root of suffering, that it binds us to the world of illusion and prevents our spiritual evolution. Yet here we are, discussing techniques to fulfill our desires through the law of assumption. There is no contradiction here when properly understood. The desire that arises within you is not random or arbitrary. It is not merely the product of social conditioning or ego gratification. Your deepest, most authentic desires are divine intimations, spiritual impulses that guide you toward the fuller expression of your true nature. When a desire persists despite all rational arguments against it, when it calls to you from the depths of your being, it is the voice of your larger self, your divine nature, seeking expression through your human experience. Such desires are not to be suppressed or transcended, but to be recognized as sacred messengers, as spiritual guides pointing the way to your fuller unfoldment. Consider the acorn. Within it lies the desire to become an oak tree. This desire is not separate from its nature. It is its nature seeking expression. Similarly, your deepest desires are not separate from your divine nature. They are that nature seeking manifestation through your unique human form. The problem arises not from desire itself, but from the belief that the fulfillment of desire comes from outside yourself, that you lack what you desired, and must therefore struggle to attain it. This belief in separation, in absence, in lack, this is the root of suffering, not the desire itself. When you practice the law of assumption, you are not feeding the ego's endless appetites or binding yourself more tightly to the wheel of illusion. You are recognizing that what you desire already exists within you, in the spiritual realm of pure potentiality. You are simply bringing it into expression through the power of consciousness. I am reminded of a woman who felt a persistent desire to create a healing center in her community. For years she had suppressed this desire, believing it to be egotistical or commercially motivated. She had been taught that spiritual advancement meant transcending personal desires. After hearing me speak about the spiritual meaning of desire, she began to see her vision in a new light, not as an ego-driven ambition, but as a divine impulse seeking expression through her unique gifts and circumstances. With this new understanding, she embraced her desire fully, assuming the feeling of already having created this healing center. Within a year, a series of seemingly miraculous events led to the manifestation of her vision. A property became available at precisely the right time. Funding appeared from unexpected sources. Collaborators with complementary skills were drawn to her project. The healing center became a reality, not through forcing or striving, but through her recognition that her desire was a divine seed planted within her consciousness. My dear friends, we have explored many profound principles of manifestation, but now I wish to address a critical aspect that is often overlooked or misunderstood, what I call the bridge of incidents. This bridge is the series of events, circumstances, and encounters that lead from your current state to the fulfillment of your desire. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, when you plant the seed of your desire in the fertile soil of consciousness, you set in motion not just the end result, but the entire sequence that must precede it. This sequence, this bridge, is constructed by infinite intelligence in ways that your analytical mind could never devise. Many seekers become discouraged because they focus solely on the final manifestation of their desire. When it does not appear immediately, they conclude that the law has failed or that they are applying it incorrectly. But manifestation rarely occurs as a single dramatic event. More commonly, it unfolds as a series of seemingly ordinary incidents that, viewed in retrospect, form a perfect bridge between your initial assumption and its complete fulfillment. The key to crossing this bridge successfully is twofold. First, you must maintain your assumption regardless of appearances. And second, you must not interfere with the construction of the bridge by insisting that it take a particular form. Consider the biblical story of Joseph, who dreamed that he would rise to a position of leadership over his brothers. Between the dream and its fulfillment lay a bridge of incidents that included being sold into slavery, being falsely accused and imprisoned, and interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. Had Joseph insisted on a direct path to leadership, had he resisted any of the events on his bridge of incidents, he would never have reached his destination. I recall a man who desired to move from New York to California but lacked the financial means to do so. After learning about the law of assumption, he began to sleep as though he were already living in California. He felt the warmth of the sunshine, smelled the ocean air, and experienced the relaxed lifestyle he associated with his desired location. His bridge of incidents was both unexpected and perfect. First, he received an invitation to house it for a friend in Pennsylvania. Not California, but a step westward. While in Pennsylvania, he met someone who offered him temporary work in Colorado. In Colorado, he formed a connection that led to a job opportunity in Northern California. Each step on the bridge seemed unrelated to his desire, yet each moved him closer to its fulfillment. Had he insisted that his manifestation take the form of an immediate job offer or financial windfall that would transport him directly to California, he might have resisted the early steps on his bridge. but because he focused on maintaining the feeling of the end result, living in California. While allowing the means to be arranged by infinite intelligence, he crossed the bridge successfully. Now, my dear friends, we come to a question that frequently arises among students of the law of assumption. What is the role of action in manifestation? If assumption creates reality, if feeling is the secret, what part does physical action play in the process? Some misinterpret these teachings to suggest that physical action is unnecessary, that one need only assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and then wait passively for its manifestation. Others go to the opposite extreme, assuming that intense, continuous action is required to force their desire into manifestation. The truth lies in understanding the proper relationship between consciousness and action. All effective action is born of the right state of consciousness. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are not eliminating action from the equation. You are ensuring that your actions flow from the consciousness of fulfillment rather than from the consciousness of lack or need. Consider the difference between these two states. When you act from a consciousness of lack, your actions are tense, anxious, desperate. They are the actions of someone trying to get something they do not have. Such actions, regardless of their external appearance, carry the energy of absence and tend to perpetuate that same absence. Conversely, when you act from the consciousness of fulfillment, your actions are relaxed, confident, inspired. They are the actions of someone who knows that what they desire is already theirs in essence and is now moving into expression. Such actions carry the energy of presence and tend to manifest that presence in visible form. I am reminded of a businessman who wanted to secure a particular client for his consulting firm. Initially, he approached the situation from a state of need and anxiety. He called the potential client repeatedly, sent elaborate proposals, and pursued the relationship with a desperation born of the fear of losing the opportunity. Despite all these actions, or perhaps because of them, the client remained elusive. The businessman then learned about the law of assumption and decided to take a different approach. He began to assume that this client was already his. He felt the satisfaction, the confidence, the natural relationship that would exist if the client had already engaged his services. From this new state of consciousness, his actions changed dramatically. Instead of pursuing the client anxiously, he extended a simple, confident invitation to meet. Instead of overwhelming them with information, he asked insightful questions about their needs. Instead of focusing on closing the deal, he focused on providing genuine value. Within 2 weeks, the client signed a contract larger than the businessman had initially proposed. The actions that led to this success were not more strenuous or more strategic than his previous efforts. They were simply actions that flowed from a different state of consciousness. This then is the proper role of action in manifestation, not to make your desire happen through force of will, but to express naturally the state of consciousness you have assumed. When you truly occupy the state of your wish fulfilled, you will find yourself moved to take precisely the right actions at precisely the right times, without calculation or struggle. Let us now explore a scriptural passage that beautifully illustrates the principles we have been discussing, the parable of the talents. In this parable, a master gives various amounts of money, talents, to 3 servants before departing on a journey. Upon his return, he finds that 2 servants have multiplied their talents, while the third has merely buried his in the ground, returning only what he was given. This parable is not about financial investment, as is commonly supposed. It is about consciousness and the law of assumption. The talents represent states of consciousness, aspects of your divine nature that have been entrusted to you for expression and expansion. The master in the parable represents your own divine self, your I am. The servants represent different aspects of your human personality, and the journey represents the time between your assumption of a state and its full manifestation in your experience. The servant who buried his talent in the ground symbolizes the common human tendency to deny or suppress our divine creative power. This servant was afraid of failure, afraid of criticism, afraid of the responsibility that comes with recognizing one's creative power. So he buried his talent, refusing to put it to use. How many of us do precisely the same thing? We learn about the creative power of imagination, the transformative potential of assumption, yet we hesitate to apply these principles fully in our lives. Perhaps we use them in small, safe ways, but we bury their fuller expression beneath the soil of doubt, convention, and fear. The servants who multiplied their talents, on the other hand, represent the proper use of your creative consciousness. They took what they were given and expanded it. They assumed greater states than those in which they began. They expressed more of their divine potential. Notice the master's response to these servants: "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." This is the promise of the law of assumption. When you faithfully maintain the feeling of a desired state, even when that state seems small or insignificant compared to your ultimate goals, you are given greater states to occupy. You enter into ever-expanding joy and creative expression. I am reminded of a young teacher who came to my lectures in New York. She had been working at a small struggling school with limited resources and difficult conditions. She dreamed of creating an innovative educational program that would transform how children learn, but the constraints of her current position seemed to make this impossible. After hearing about the parable of the talents and its relation to the law of assumption, she decided to use the seemingly small talent she had been given. Instead of focusing on the limitations of her situation, she began to assume the feeling of already directing her ideal educational program. She felt the satisfaction of seeing children thrive under her innovative approach. She experienced the joy of collaborating with like-minded educators. She assumed the identity of an educational pioneer. She did not quit her job or make dramatic external changes. She simply performed her current roles from this new state of consciousness. She brought elements of her vision into her classroom within the constraints of the existing system. She spoke about her educational philosophy with quiet confidence whenever appropriate opportunities arose. Within 6 months, a philanthropist who was interested in educational innovation visited her school. Impressed by her approach and vision, even in that limited setting, he offered to fund a pilot program based on her ideas. Within a year, she was directing precisely the educational initiative she had been imagining. She had not buried her talent in fear or hesitation. She had put it to use, faithfully maintaining the feeling of her expanded state. And as promised in the parable, because she was faithful over a little, she was set over much. This is the invitation extended to each of us, to take whatever state we currently occupy, whatever circumstances we currently experience, and to expand them through the faithful application of the law of assumption. When we do this, we discover that even greater states await our occupation, even fuller expressions of our divine nature await our embodiment. My dear friends, as we continue to explore these divine principles, let us turn our attention to a concept that is essential for effective manifestation, the power of the present moment. For it is only in the present that your creative power can be exercised. It is only in the now that your assumptions take root and begin to grow into manifestation. Many seekers fail in their manifestation efforts because they locate their desires in a distant future. They say to themselves, someday I will be wealthy. Eventually I will find love. In time my health will improve. But by projecting their desires into the future, they ensure that those desires remain perpetually distant, perpetually unrealized. The secret is to collapse time in your imagination, to bring the future state into the present moment through the power of assumption. Instead of seeing your desire as something that will be yours someday, you must claim it as already yours now. This is what Scripture means when it says, "Before they call, I will answer." The fulfillment precedes the call because both exist in the eternal now of divine consciousness. Consider how differently you experience something when you anticipate it versus when you remember it. When you anticipate an event, it feels separate from you, distant, uncertain. But when you remember an event, it feels like a part of you integrated into your being, absolute in its reality. This is why it is so powerful to imagine your desire as a memory rather than as an anticipation, to recall it as something that has already happened rather than to project it as something that might happen. I recall a man who had been attempting to manifest a particular career opportunity for nearly 2 years. He had visualized it, affirmed it, taken practical steps toward it, yet it remained elusive. When I spoke with him about the power of the present moment, he realized his mistake. He had been consistently projecting his desire into the future, seeing it as something he would eventually attain rather than something that was already his in the present. He shifted his approach completely. Instead of imagining his desired career as a future achievement, he began to assume that he was already living it. He felt the satisfaction, the challenges, the daily rhythm of his desired position as present realities. He spoke, thought, and felt from the assumption that he was already where he wanted to be. Within 30 days he received a call about an opportunity that matched his desire precisely. The position had not been advertised, his name had been suggested by someone who somehow knew of his expertise in the field. Within 6 weeks he was working in exactly the role he had been assuming in consciousness. When you truly understand the power of the present moment, you realize that imagination is not merely a way to rehearse for future experiences. It is a creative act that shapes reality from the eternal now. Your assumption held in the present moment with the feeling of reality sets in motion the forces that must bring about its physical manifestation. This is why all effective spiritual practices emphasize presence, awareness of the now. It is not merely a path to peace or enlightenment. It is the doorway to your creative power. Only in the present moment can you exercise the divine faculty of assumption. Only in the now can you plant the seed that will grow into your desired reality. Let us now explore a fascinating principle that underpins successful manifestation, what I call the law of reversibility. This law recognizes that just as physical actions produce psychological states can produce physical actions. Just as circumstances create feelings, feelings can create circumstances, In your everyday experience, you notice that certain events tend to produce certain emotions. Receiving good news makes you happy. Encountering obstacles makes you frustrated. Being treated kindly makes you feel appreciated. This is the common, natural sequence from outer event to inner feeling. But the law of assumption works in the reverse direction. Instead of waiting for external events to create your desired feeling state, you create the feeling state first, knowing that the corresponding external events must follow. This is the law of reversibility in action. Consider this simple example. When you experience success, you naturally stand taller, breathe more deeply, and smile more freely. These are the physical expressions of the feeling of success. But the reverse is also true. When you deliberately stand taller, breathe more deeply, and smile more freely, you begin to feel more successful. The outer expression creates the inner state. This principle extends far beyond mere body language. The entire fabric of your experience follows this pattern. If wealth would make you feel secure and abundant, then feeling secure and abundant now will draw wealth into your life. If a loving relationship would make you feel cherished and appreciated, then feeling cherished and appreciated now will attract a loving relationship. I recall a woman who had been seeking healing from a chronic health condition. For years she had tried various treatments and therapies, always with the thought, when I am healed, I will feel energetic, grateful, and fully alive. She was waiting for the external condition of health to create these internal feelings. After learning about the law of reversibility, she took a radically different approach. Instead of waiting to be healed in order to feel energetic, grateful, and alive, she began to cultivate these feeling states regardless of her physical condition. Each morning upon waking, she would feel the energy flowing through her body, the gratitude for another day of life, the joy of being fully alive, all while her physical symptoms were still present. Within 3 months, her health had improved dramatically. By the end of the year, she was completely free of the condition that had troubled her for so long. The healing manifested not because she found the perfect treatment, but because she applied the law of reversibility. She created the feeling that would naturally result from healing, and the physical healing followed in response to that feeling state. This is why feeling is so crucial in the manifestation process. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are not merely engaging in a psychological exercise, you are activating the law of reversibility, which must bring into physical manifestation the circumstances that correspond to your feeling state. The world teaches you to wait for your circumstances to change before you change your feelings. But those who understand the law of assumption know that this approach keeps you perpetually bound to your current conditions. True transformation begins when you reverse the sequence, when you change your feeling state first, regardless of circumstances, knowing that circumstances must follow feeling, not the other way around. My dear friends, as we near the conclusion of our exploration, I wish to introduce you to a concept that adds depth and dimension to our understanding of the law of assumption, what I call the invisible partner. This partner is your own wonderful human imagination, the divine creative faculty that resides within you. Most people relate to their imagination as a mere fantasy machine, a way to escape reality or entertain themselves with impossible scenarios. But I tell you that your imagination is far more than this. It is the very creative power of the universe individualized as you. It is God in action within the human soul. When you truly recognize your imagination as your invisible partner in creation, your entire approach to manifestation transforms. Instead of seeing yourself as a lone individual struggling against circumstances, you recognize that you are in constant communion with a power that transcends all limitations, a power that can reshape reality according to its vision. This invisible partner is not separate from you. It is your own higher self, your divine nature expressing through your human form. Yet it operates according to laws that transcend your conscious, rational understanding. Your imagination knows the perfect path to the manifestation of your desire, a path that your logical mind could never devise. Consider how this partnership works. Your conscious mind identifies a desire, something you wish to experience or possess. You then present this desire to your imagination through the act of assumption. By feeling the reality of your desire as already fulfilled, your imagination, your invisible partner, takes this assumed state and begins to weave it into the fabric of your reality through a series of what appear to be coincidences, chance encounters, sudden inspirations, and unexpected opportunities. I recall a writer who had been struggling for years to publish his novel. He had submitted his manuscript to countless publishers and agents, always with the same result: rejection. After hearing about the invisible partner, he decided to change his approach. Instead of continuing his desperate efforts to find a publisher, he began to commune with his imagination as a trusted partner. Each night before sleep, he would feel the joy and satisfaction of holding his published book in his hands. He would feel the weight of it, see his name on the cover, even smell the fresh ink and paper. He would experience the gratitude of knowing that his work was now reaching readers around the world. Most importantly, he released the need to figure out how this would happen. He stopped strategizing about which publishers to approach or how to improve his query letters. He simply maintained the feeling of the wish fulfilled and allowed his invisible partner to determine the path to its manifestation. Within a month, he was seated next to a woman at a dinner party who, it turned out, was an editor at a publishing house. Their conversation naturally turned to his writing, and she expressed interest in seeing his manuscript. 2 months later, he signed a contract for the publication of his novel. His invisible partner had arranged what his conscious efforts could not accomplish in years of struggle. This is the nature of the relationship with your imagination. You provide the desire and the feeling of its fulfillment. Your invisible partner provides the bridge of incidents that leads to its manifestation. Your task is not to determine how your desire will be realized, but to maintain faithfully the feeling of its realization, trusting your invisible partner to arrange the perfect path to its expression in your physical reality. I am reminded of a brilliant musician who came to me deeply frustrated. He had been practicing diligently for years, mastering his instrument with remarkable technical precision. Yet despite his excellence, he had failed to secure the position in a prestigious orchestra that he so desired. He had attended numerous auditions, each time playing flawlessly, yet always receiving the same response, that while his technique was impeccable, his music lacked something essential. After hearing me speak about the divine paradox of effort and surrender, he realized the nature of his imbalance. His approach had been all effort and no surrender. He had been trying to force the music through sheer technical will, leaving no room for the mysterious, uncontrollable element that gives music its soul. He began to apply the principles we have discussed, assuming the feeling of already being a member of the orchestra he desired to join. But more than this, he allowed himself to surrender to the music itself. During his practice sessions, he maintained the technical discipline he had developed, but he added to it a willingness to let go, to allow the music to play through him rather than being played by him. When he next auditioned for the orchestra, something remarkable happened. His playing still had the technical excellence he had always demonstrated, but now it also possessed that indefinable quality that had previously been missing. The music flowed through him with an authenticity and emotional depth that moved the selection committee deeply. He was offered the position immediately. This is the divine paradox in action, the harmony of disciplined, focused attention and complete trusting surrender. In your manifestation practice, you too must find this balance. You must make the effort to assume and maintain your desired state with clarity and persistence, while simultaneously surrendering all anxiety about the process, all need to control the unfolding of your manifestation. My dear friends, as we conclude our exploration of these divine principles, I wish to speak to you about what I call the promise, the ultimate fulfillment of the law of assumption, and the true purpose behind all manifestation. Throughout our time together, we have discussed how to use the law of assumption to transform your circumstances, to create wealth, health, loving relationships, successful careers, and countless other specific manifestations. These are all worthy desires, reflections of your divine nature seeking expression through your human experience. But beyond all these particular manifestations lies a greater promise, a more profound awakening that is the true destination of your spiritual journey. This promise is nothing less than the realization of your divine identity, the awakening to who you really are. The Bible expresses this promise in many ways. I and my Father are one. The kingdom of God is within you. Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. These are not poetic metaphors or impossible standards. They are statements of an absolute truth about your nature, a truth that is waiting to be realized through your conscious awakening. You see, my friends, all your specific desires for wealth, for health, for love, for success are really expressions of a deeper longing to experience your divine nature, to know yourself as the infinite being you truly are. Each manifestation you create is a step on the path to this ultimate realization. When you successfully manifest a desire through the law of assumption, you demonstrate to yourself that consciousness is the only reality, that your inner state determines your outer experience. As you accumulate these experiences, as you prove this law in the laboratory of your daily life, you gradually awaken to the greater truth that you are not merely a human being using spiritual laws to improve your circumstances, but a spiritual being having a human experience for the purpose of knowing yourself as divine. This is the promise fulfilled, the realization of your oneness with the infinite, the recognition that the I am at the core of your being is not separate from the I am that spoke the universe into existence. It is the discovery that the kingdom you have been seeking outside yourself has been within you all along, waiting only for your recognition and claim. I am reminded of a woman who had been applying the law of assumption for many years, successfully creating numerous specific manifestations in her life. She had manifested wealth, health, a loving marriage, a beautiful home, all the outer symbols of an abundant life. Yet despite these achievements, she felt a lingering sense of incompleteness, a subtle but persistent feeling that something essential was still missing. In our conversation, she realized that she had been using the law primarily to change her circumstances rather than to awaken to her true nature. She had been seeking fulfillment through external conditions rather than through the realization of who she really was. This insight marked a turning point in her journey. She began to use the law of assumption not merely to create specific manifestations, but to assume the feeling of her divine identity. Instead of imagining particular outcomes or conditions, she imagined the feeling of limitlessness, of perfect love, of complete oneness with all of life. She assumed the state of someone who knows themselves as an expression of the divine, as one with the infinite creative power of the universe. As she persisted in this assumption, a profound transformation occurred. The sense of incompleteness dissolved, replaced by a deep, unshakable peace that existed independently of external circumstances. Her specific manifestations continued, perhaps even more effortlessly than before, but they were now expressions of her awakened state rather than attempts to reach it. This, my dear friends, is the ultimate purpose of the law of assumption, not merely to improve your human condition, but to awaken you to your divine reality. As you practice this law, as you assume the feeling of your wishes fulfilled, remember that beyond all specific manifestations lies this greater promise, this deeper awakening to who you really are. And so, as we conclude our journey together, I invite you to continue applying these principles in your daily life. Use the law of assumption to create the specific manifestations you desire. But remember always that each manifestation is a stepping stone to your ultimate realization. Let each success in the outer world remind you of the greater truth, that you are one with the creative power of the universe, that your consciousness is the only reality, that the kingdom of heaven is within you. The promise is already fulfilled within you. Your task is not to create it, but to realize it, to awaken to what has been true since the beginning of time, that you are divine, that you are infinite, that you are the very presence of God individualized as a human experience for the purpose of knowing itself through you. Go forth now and live from this understanding. Assume not only the feeling of your specific wishes fulfilled, but the feeling of your divine nature realized. For in this assumption lies the fulfillment of all desires, the answer to all questions, the resolution of all seeking. In this assumption lies the promise fulfilled. Thank you, my dear friends, and may your journey of awakening bring you to the full realization of who you truly are.